Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I started as a young researcher in Human Brain Project in 2016, so 1 year after I came to Denmark, and that's why it's a real pleasure to every time HBP invites me, to give a talk. Today, so let's see. I hope it works. No. No. Oh yes, it's this one. So go back instead. So as the title of my talk says, from computational neuroscience to autonomous robotics and back, I would like to show you some examples of works that we have done since I started in HBP and then also in another European project and afterwards to show how we can exploit computational neuroscience principles to get robots or artificial machines to replicate, to do some tasks as living systems do. Of course, still we are far from getting precise and accurate intelligence behavior. But by doing so, we can again test some new hypotheses from neuroscience. And that's why we go back. So, no, this one. Okay. In general, as Elias said in the presentation, introduction, we combine artificial intelligence, robotics, computational neuroscience, and biology into a whole field that is neurorobotics. Neurorobotics started more or less around the 1950s thanks to a roboticist called Gray Walter, an American actually roboticist or cybernetics. He did very simple experiments, and since then with a small robot and a small nervous system. But since then, neurorobotics has grown, has changed, because we do more challenging, more complex experiments by using complex robots, but the goal is still the same. So we want to model the brain and understand it. So here you see a mouse, a living animal, right? Some of you can say, oh, that's a shame, a poor animal. Yes, but thanks to the experiments done on animals, we can understand what is going on the brain and extract data and build the mathematical models. So the goal we have is to observe how the animals, also human beings, act in the environment. So how the brain is interacts with first the body and then the environment, in order to replicate both simulations and or physical realistic experiments with robots resembling the animals. And of course, we need a brain. And the brain can be very simple, it depends on the mathematical model we have, or complex, so comprising millions of neurons. And of course, we can use very simple robots, or we can go up to complex robots such as humanoids or software robots. But why we do this? Because we really want to see how realistic brains then operate together with realistic bodies. And by letting the robots doing what we want or we expect they do, we can observe their growing skills, and then we can reverse engineer the brain. So I started with an example of a work that was done together with the EPFL. And during this work, we wanted to build a novel bioinspired control system in which the cerebellum, and I will give you an introduction later on about this area, how the cerebellum is involved in adaptive locomotion. So we started from one hypothesis from neuroscientists, based on which the cerebellum is supposed or was supposed to provide an error called double support asymmetry, as you can see on the top corner on the right. And by doing supervised learning, the cerebellum is supposed to provide a correction as a pattern correction to the pattern formation of the spinal central pattern generator. And so we said, okay, let's test this hypothesis. And we used a mouse in simulation, which is working on just the hind limb, a bit weird, I know, but in simulation we could do this. And on the split belt, at some point, it's a bit difficult to see it, but one belt, the velocity of one belt was modified, was make it faster, because we wanted to test if the cerebellum was able to provide adaptive corrections, and actually did. And through the result we got, we could check that they are quite similar to what we get in mice, in real mice, and in human beings. So at my lab, the Neurorobotics Technology Lab in Lyngby, Technical University of Denmark, we build a bioinspired adaptive control system because we want to, first of all, open revolutionary paradigms in robotics about creating autonomous systems. So systems that are intelligent, so they are showing intelligent behavior, and also they let us study the interplay between the brain and the body. And in terms of applications, well, we can use them in many, such as collaborative robotics, so manufacturing is just an example, as assistive living technologies for elderly people. And we can even use them as a tool for studying neurodegenerative diseases. If I want a system to act intelligently as possible, well, the first thing I have to do is to look at the key principles of intelligence. You may disagree, I know, there are many other key principles, but I just listed here the main important ones. So the first is the learning, is the key master. And in order to learn, we need plasticity, so we need a brain. And the second one is embodiment. I can do whatever I want with my body, but because thanks to the flexibility and actual properties that my body has. I'm, for example, grabbing this object with my hand, and I can do this quite easily, and it doesn't slip away because of the properties of my fingers. If I want to use a robot to do this, well, it's kind of complicated. I need to weight this object. I need to calculate the measure, the size of this object, and many other computations, especially with the hand, which is the most complex part. We have many degrees of freedom. However, we don't do this, right? But again, I do this because I have this fantastic hand. And then the third one is autonomy. Autonomy means that the agent, the artificial system, is able to interact with the world by itself, so without any help from the human. But again, if I want all of this in a machine, I need a brain. One complex part we have in the brain is the cerebellum. The cerebellum is an orchestrator of our movement. We need the cerebellum in order to have precision, accuracy in our movements. And what is particularly nice about the cerebellum is that it doesn't have any program at all. So we are born without a program, and because our body is changing all the time, right? But not only the body, also the conditions, the context in which we have to act is changing all the time. So by not having a program, we are able actually to learn every time and to adapt. And then the cerebellum also receives information from many parts of the body and from the external world. And it provides motor and non-motor commands. approximately it's 40 inputs to 1 output. But why I'm talking about the cerebellum? Because, well, I've been working with that since my PhD. And the examples following are about using the cerebellum. Also the first one, you remember, there was the cerebellum involved. So just a little bit of theory. The cerebellum, so how the motor control works in our brain. First of all, on top of the brain, there is an eye, a symbol there, which means instruction. So we receive an instruction every time we want to move, and based on a goal, on something we want to achieve. And in the motor cortex, there is a feedback controller, kind of. And this feedback controller is the one providing, based on the instruction I get, the motor command I need to move an object, or for example, to move my hand. And then what happens? That suddenly the cerebellum starts creating memories. And these memories are called internal models. So there are two different kinds of internal models. One is forward and one is inverse. It depends on what they get and what they provide. Inverse models provide the inverse dynamics, which means forces, for example. And the forward model there on the right provides the forward dynamics. So it can even replace, based on the theory, the external sensory feedback. Why we have this? So why the cerebellum does this? It does this because we can get precise coordinated movements, we can mimic the behavior of a natural process, and we can achieve superior compliance, which means that I can just apply small amount of forces to move something. Normally, if you do it with a robot, for example, if you use position control, just to move one piece to one place to another, and you want to have a very high precision, you have to apply high torques. So we normally have high gains in our controllers. So from within the two main projects I've been working on, which is biomodular, the first one, which was my Marie Curie project, and the HBP until 2020, the main outcomes we got was to have a spiking cerebellar circuit, which was embedded into a novel bioinspired control circuit. And the particular thing of this model we built was that it was actually reproducing multiple or modular microcircuit as in the real cerebellum to learn these forward and inverse internal models. This algorithm was applied or embedded into multiple robots, such as a manipulator arm, the humanoid robot, and a modular robot called Fable. So here on the left, we have an example of the humanoid robot ICAP that has to balance a table on the hand, and suddenly a ball appears on the table, and the goal is to put the ball just in the middle of the table. So try to find out the balance to do that. Of course, it may seem very simple, and there are strategies in robotics to do it quite easily, but we didn't use those strategies. We had a brain, we had cerebellum, try to learn to do this. So the only thing we said to the robot was how the joints and the links of the arm and the hand were, and provide a vision control. But all the rest was missing. So I didn't provide any other exteroceptive information about the ball, for example. On the other video, there is a robot in a four-legged configuration working on a surface. Actually, by the way, these experiments were done in the neurorobotics platform of HBP. which is an incredible tool for doing the simulations in robotics. And then in that experiment, the control circuit was similar to the real first one I showed you, but the connections were of course different because we were testing different hypotheses. So we had a central pattern generator together with a cerebellum, and the goal was to show how the robot was able to synchronize the four legs and achieve locomotion control. Okay, in these other experiments, what we did was again to use the NRP, but to use a bigger cerebellum comprising thousands and thousands of neurons. I don't remember exactly maybe 10,000 neurons in total of the cerebellum. So the robot has to follow a trajectory with the end effector, an H-shaped trajectory. And again, normally in robotics, so you can do it very easily. You give trajectory planning to the robot, but we didn't. And we said to the robot, the cerebellum, teach the robot how to do it, learn it on your way. How? But well, of course, we know where the robot and the effector had to be at each particular time, so we can calculate the error, and the cerebellum learns by this error. So it's a supervised error learning. And the same we did in simulation. We also tried to do it on the real robot by using Spinnaker. And then also in my research, I'm interested in particular to compare traditional control methods and neural control methods. And I'm quite convinced that we can get a lot by merging them for achieving again superior control of robotics performance. In this other example was we wanted to test again how the cerebellum achieves gaze stabilization by combining three reflexes, which are the VCR, the VOR, and the OKR. And for the first time, we were able to, together with the Biorobotics Institute of Pisa, to embed the three systems to learn the internal models associated to the gaze stabilization into a humanoid robot icon. The robot was supposed to watch a point on the screen, a green point, do you see it? And by applying a disturbance in the torso and activating the three reflexes, the humanoid was able to follow this point besides the disturbance we gave. Okay, so this is another, this work was done outside the HBP, but part of my postdoc of my Marie Curie. And it's about sensorimotor coordination. So you see a guy here running and making crazy things. Not something that everybody can do, maybe, or maybe yes, if you train, right? So I'm quite sure he has been training a lot, but maybe what you are not thinking is that he has been training since he was born, right? And we do that. It's called motor bubbling. So we constantly move our limbs, exploring our input space, and we are doing learning at the same time. And we are ready, after we learn, we are ready to do what we want, so to work. That baby is going to work in a few months after exploring. No? Okay, so we said, why not doing the same with our robots? And we used a manipulator. So we built a motor, it's called visual servoing with motor bubbling. So we have a camera looking at one specific target. You see the purple dot. And we give the robot all the information coming from the cameras, so exteroceptive information, and also proprioceptive information. So it has to know the positions, the forces, velocities in this case applied to each joint. And after many iterations of learning this, it was able to target the point. But after doing this, we said, okay, let's put the cerebellum and see if we can achieve even a faster movement and less error, as you can see there. So the goal was to go from the start to the target by reducing the time and making it a straight path. And we observed that together with the cerebellum, we were able not only to reduce the distance error, but also increase the number of successful trials. This is actually what the cerebellum does. And then we said, okay, let's see what happens in a common experiment that is done with subjects with cerebellar disease. So when there is a cerebellar disease called ataxia, people are not able to follow targets in a straight line. So they do this and with the continuously jerks. And so we try to eliminate it, to remove the cerebellum, and we noticed that. However, with the cerebellum, the error was reduced, and actually in many cases, the robot was able to do it quite accurately. What we can achieve by doing that? Okay, now we know that the cerebellum does what it does, but then we can look into our computational models and see what is really going on in the presence of a disease. In robotics, still there are many challenges, many things to solve. And neurorobotics is trying to use the understanding of the brain to fill them. For example, robotics still we don't achieve versatility. Robots are not so good at reasoning, how to learn to plan complex action sequences, so flexibility. There are many tools that we can use and principal methods that we can get from computational neuroscience, but we need to integrate all of them together, which is quite a challenge. And also another gap that we have is because if you remember at the beginning, I said, I want to study the brain-body interplay. So it would be good to have realistic brain and realistic bodies. Yet there is not such biological plausibility in our models, and also musculoskeletal system available for our experiments. So people are working on these things, and for me, for my group, it would be amazing to have them at some point. And then why? Because my vision is actually to model neurodegenerative diseases. And in order to do this, I must have realistic brain models and then embed them into realistic bodies. So what we are doing at the moment is, thanks to a project that we got from Lübeck Foundation, is to study the Parkinson's disease, at least model one of the multiple symptoms Parkinson's disease produces, which is in locomotion this time. And then in the future, we want to integrate different brain areas, especially the cerebellum, together the basal ganglia, and see if the interplay between them is one of the root causes of this disease. And finally, by doing that, then we can open tools for diagnosis, or especially early diagnosis, which is missing at the moment of neurodegenerative diseases. So we are building machine learning tools for symptom detection and classification, and building biomarkers for classifying those symptoms. Finally, I would like to thank, of course, all this work was done in collaboration with many people. I thank my lab and the collaborators, ex-alumni, and HBP EBRAINS. Thank you.